Today's guest is someone from the textile industry, someone trying to revive the dying Indian art forms like Himru. Here is Arushi Chaudhary Khanna, the founder of Loomkatha.
Thank you for having me on your program, Deepa. It's an absolute pleasure.
It's so heartwarming to know that at Loomkatha, you're not only reviving the dying art forms, but in the process, you're actually giving life to those artisans. So, how did this journey even start?
Our primary goal is to look at livelihoods for artisans. And we've always considered that the revival or the promotion of the art form is a means to an end. So, just to give you a bit of background on the industry and on my work,
Mhm.
India produces 95% of the world's handwoven textiles. So,
Wow.
we have, I mean, infinite number of weaves and many different textile traditions, which are completely extinct in any other country of the world. So so there is this big treasure house of skill, and as you said, it's come down from generations, so it's not
Right.
documented. It's really passed on from one generation to the next. But the sad part is that almost 46% of our weavers, and I'll speak specifically about weaves because that's been my area of specialty. 46% of our handloom weavers live below poverty line even today, and those who are
Wow.
above it are not very much above. So if you go to a country like Switzerland or you go to a country like Canada, they revere their craftsmen. So they will show you a tiny little piece of lace that has been made by a senior craftsman in a beautiful Swiss cottage, and hundreds of tourists are lining up to see that. But in India, our craftsmen are very vulnerable. They are they are fighting to keep doing what they do, and that is something that we're trying to change in our way, in our own way. We want
Mm.
to see how uh, craftsmen can live a life of dignity and respect, and that comes with increased income, and that is really the goal of Loom Katha. So we want to work with as many of India's handloom weavers as we can. I finished my master's from NIFT in fashion management.
Well,
And my aim at that point was to get a job in, one of the glamorous new malls that have opened up. This was way back in 2009-10, when malls were just coming into India and it all seemed very, bright and glitzy. But it was when I was exposed to the weavers, to a weaving community in Gujarat during college, that I realized that, that if we educated urban Indians with so much of so-called skills and knowledge can't do something to change this situation, then what's the point? And that's how I began working with a handloom NGO called Women Weave in Madhya Pradesh.
mm-hmm.
And over the years, I've worked with weavers across India with various organizations. And that really gave me the impetus to set up Loom Katha. So we are working in Bengal. We are working in MP, in a place called Maheshwar. And our main project right now is the revival of this technique of Himru weaving, which is
Mm.
from Aurangabad in Maharashtra. So that's the birthplace of Himru.
So you were talking about this women weave, right? So what do they
Yeah.
do? Are they in similar space or?
Yes, so they are a very, very renowned and very old organization that
Mm-hmm.
works with women weavers primarily.
Wow.
Yes, so they started off wanting to provide work to women who were, the sole breadwinners in their families. So single women, women who had lost their partners. So that was my starting point. That was, and really, for a city kid, I grew up in Bombay. To understand the sensitivity of what we do, I think it was a uh, great training ground for me. Women We works mainly with khadi weavers, and they were very influential in creating a sort of modern vibe for khadi. That now is on Instagram and things. You see a lot of designers working with khadi, and it's becoming cool again. But they were one of the first to really say, can we take khadi to a Western audience? Can we have American designers coming and working with our fabrics? And that was the starting point for me.
Can you tell more about what exactly is the Himru, the background, the history of it?
So Himru is one of the most fascinating textiles of India, and also one of the oldest. It's believed that Himru weaving started in Aurangabad in about I mean, there isn't much data, but around the 13th century, when Muhammad bin Tughlaq moved his capital from Delhi to Daulatabad. So Daulatabad is the old name for Aurangabad. It's believed that Persian weavers came along with him to this region. And now this is adjacent to Pathan, which is famous for the Paithani sari. So it's believed that the Persian weavers interacted with the local weavers of Pathan. And we can only conjecture, but it's believed that that's how this fabric came into being. So it is pure cotton, which is something which is typical of India. So silk weaving actually started in India much later. So the base of a Himru fabric is pure cotton, and the designs are woven in silk as a sort of a second layer on top of the base. So that's why if you see the fabric, it has a very 3D effect, like the designs kind of really jump out at you because of this technique of weaving, which is pretty unique in India. So a lot of people have asked me this question: how is a Himru different from a Banarsi? Because both are very, very ornate, very heavy kind of products. And I can only say that if you look at a Banarsi, the design is kind of embedded. That's the beauty of a Banarsi sari, that these beautiful motifs and zari work kind of are like embedded in the base of the fabric, whereas in Himru it's more embossed. It's like a third layer that is it. So that's the technicality of it. But in terms of history, Aurangabad became a big center for Himru, and it was the favored fabric of the royals. So it was used mainly to make sherwanis. In fact, at that time, sherwanis also were not invented. They were achkans. So it was the achkans for the royalty of the Deccan. That was mainly the purpose of Himru. So you will always see that the motifs are very very vibrant, very typically they have a lot of very obvious Persian and Mughal influences. And later on, when after the British came, and that region continued to be part of the Nizamiyat of Hyderabad, so the Nizams and their nobles continued to patronize Himru, and it really flourished right up until about 1950 or 1960s, when then even the Indian government used Himru for the ambassadorial residences in foreign countries. So it was used as an upholstery fabric for these grand residences for this new country that were being set up everywhere. And so it's always been a royal luxury fabric. You can equate it with a pashmina or a kani shawl of Kashmir. But the tragedy is that post the 60s, the craft became unviable. So it became a very expensive product. And without these other things that we've been talking about, without marketing, without customer awareness, without all of those other parts of selling of a product, it began to decline. The customer base began to reduce. Since there was no awareness, there were no new customers. Weavers began to reduce. The existing weavers found it difficult to continue. And the sort of the demise of Himru was further increased by competition from the power looms that came up in Aurangabad. So power looms came up with a very noble notion. In the 1920s, the Nizam installed the first power loom machines imported from England. And initially it was a different product, and Himru was, it was a luxury product. Nobody could compete. But over time, the power looms began to replicate the Himru motifs. So now for a layperson, as you said, you don't have context. So you see a product that looks, it looks like it's kind of Mughal, it has paisleys and it has flowers, woven into it. You won't really know. And it is 1/100th the cost or the price of your hand woven Himru. So the industry really suffered, and they say that in fact, I was reading an old census document done in the 1950s. They said there were 3,000 handloom weavers in Aurangabad at that time, but they gradually dwindled till about the 1990s, where there was only one karkhana left with 10 weavers, and even that gradually shut down. So when we happened to move to Aurangabad and I started researching on this project, I was not able to find any weavers. So sadly, every shop in Aurangabad said, we are selling Himru fabric. But what you got was, some synthetic yarn, mill woven product that was being passed off as Himru. Or there were Banarsi saris that were being passed off as Himru. There was Surat, the Surat power loom saris were being called Himru. There was no sign of the real thing. And I began to wonder, and it was literally like a treasure hunt, asking, historians in the area, asking people who are doing something around textiles, do you know what is happening? And finally, I was able to locate two weavers who used to practice the craft, but in 98, 99, when that last one workshop shut down, they were out of work, and they were then, one of them was driving a tempo, and the other one was, had a little shop that they were selling odds and ends. So the craft had completely died down, and even there were no looms left. And that was the sad story that we started with. And gradually we were able to locate old fabric samples. We had them replicated. We then started weaving again with this one person. He trained 3 other women. And that's how we've sort of moved along to a place where our products are highly appreciated. And as I said, that income, so the women we work with were earlier earning 3,000 rupees a month, not even regular. Now they can earn 5,000 to 6,000 rupees a month. So that is a significant change. Our master weaver earns between 12,000 to 15,000 rupees a month. So that you can see the change that has brought in their life. They are able to afford better medical care. There is, more stability. Just you're not wondering how your next month is going to look like. So, so I think that, I think it's been very satisfying to see that we could do this. So even for Loomkatha, this was the first project that was, so challenging. Also, luckily, one of the quirks of fate is that one of the old families who used to run that last karkhana of Himru, they, in their sort of, I don't know, attic or go down kind of place, they have quite a few of the original swatches, which their grandfather had saved. So we had some sort of base from there as well that we could build on. while
Mm-hmm.
the looms in Aurangabad had completely shut down, there is a very famous textile. I would say she's a doyen in the handloom world, Suraya Hassan Bose. She's in Hyderabad.
Mm-hmm.
She must be, I think, 90 plus now, and she has kept
Mm-hmm.
alive. She made it her life's mission to keep alive the crafts of the Deccan region. So she has a beautiful workshop where she still has two Himru looms, and she has
Mm.
documents of the old textile, the Salar Jung Museum in Hyderabad. Because you see, the patrons of Himru were the Nizams in Hyderabad. So any sort of information that we have is from there.
So, Qurayshis, they were also trying to revive this art form. So,
So
are they from?
they are from Aurangabad. So this is, like I
Huh.
told you, they were the ones running the last Karkhana up until 98, 99. Their
Oh.
grandfather, who's passed away, he was a national award winning craftsman of Himru. So, but
Oh.
unfortunately, what happened is that they were not able to sustain, because a lot of crafts in India got government support. They got, a lot of aid. Himru
Mm-hmm.
was kind of neglected. So when the market
Hmm.
started shrinking, they couldn't keep up. I mean, they couldn't maintain this huge establishment because there were no buyers
Oh,
at
I
the time.
see.
So,
Hmm.
so that's how they eventually. So we actually started in their work shed. They had three looms, old looms, which were in completely defunct condition.
Hmm.
They literally they had covers over them. Some of the parts were broken. Some of the wood had swollen, and we actually started by repairing one of those looms,
Mm-hmm.
and literally sitting up till like 12 at midnight figuring out, getting parts from other places, and actually the first pieces were woven on one of those old looms. And that, as I said, I mean, we've been blessed. When lockdown happened,
Mm-hmm.
a corporate in Aurangabad had they supported us during the research phase of the project for 1 year, and they had committed to help us set up new looms. But
Hmm.
with lockdown, the entire everything went into a tizzy, and they diverted their CSR funding to PM cares and health related
Mm-hmm.
projects. So again, we were completely ground zero. Had spent one
Mm-hmm.
year in research, no product, no marketing, no sales. And what do? You have now trained, a group of 5 people who really want to do this, and you're stuck. But we
Hmm.
ran a campaign on Instagram called, we just hashtagged it calm not done, that we're not looking for donations, but please
Mm-hmm.
pre-book an order with us. And when
Mm-hmm.
lockdown stops, we will weave and send you your product.
Hmm.
So we got such a good response to that we were able to set up new looms. And now, so we have
Wow.
5 new looms that have been set up, and weaving is now in a bit more professional and in a bit more comfortable space than this dusty old shed where we were really struggling to create products. So
That's the
yeah,
power of
so
social media, Arushi.
absolutely, and really about getting the word out there, that I mean,
Right.
and actually we are seeing this with a lot of other crafts. So
Mm-hmm.
like you said, India has so many. So a lot of crafts have really benefited, like places like Kutch and Gujarat, where craftsmen were a little bit more educated and have a little bit more exposure. They are now, selling comfortably through WhatsApp. They're selling through Facebook, through Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
through Amazon.
Yeah.
So it's very positive. Like, I think we are in the best time for handlooms. But
Mm-hmm.
then you have a craft like Himru, which is like completely devastated. So, and
Hmm.
that's really where I see myself, being able to bring some value in taking these crafts that are completely neglected, and trying to bring them to a level where there is market, there is quality of product, and
Mhm.
that it can sustain itself, that it uh, sort of it's a positive cycle rather than a negative one that we have seen in Aurangabad.
Yeah. So typically, how long does it take to, let's take a shawl, for example,
Mm-hmm.
to weave a Himru shawl?
So
How many
depending
days?
on the design, it can
Mm-hmm.
take between about say 12 days to
Oh,
a month. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So, and this is just the weaving process. So before weaving starts, there is a process of preparing the yarn, dyeing the colors, loading it
Hmm.
on the loom, then setting up the loom for a particular design. So for each
All right.
design, the loom setup is different. So
Hmm.
that entire process is not accounted for. 12 days is just the weaving time for a simple design, and then it goes up to it could take a month or a bit more as well.
Was marketing was the only reason for the decline of this art form, Himru?
So marketing was the starting point, but then what happened was as the numbers dwindled, all of these supporting industries like the yarn supplier, the person who'll do
Mm-hmm.
the dyeing, who'll set up the looms, all of those also disintegrated. So it
Yeah.
became very expensive to even, so the product kept becoming more and more expensive.
Right,
Because then
right,
you
right.
need somebody to come from so the neighboring town of Yeola, which is a weaving town, somebody would come from there or somebody would come from Banaras. So
Hmm.
all of that, it took a lot of time, and it became, so the supply chain then started breaking down basically.
So when I was reading, I also came across Toda embroidery from
Yes,
Nilgiris,
yes,
Parsi embroidery,
yes, Gara.
Patola.
Yes.
They are also kind of close to kind of dying art form. Is that right?
Yes, yes, definitely. So, I think if you go to any nook and cranny of India, you will find one art form that is breathing its last. I mean, here we are talking about
Oh.
textiles, but if you go
Uh-huh.
into things like metalwork or you go into woodwork, it's
Mm.
infinite, and it's really, I think that the next 10 to 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
whatever we can save, we will save, otherwise it is lost forever. So there are
Oh.
many crafts that have kind of that may not even be documented. The thing with
Mm.
Himru is because it was a royal craft, there was some references, there is some documentation, but I remember going to a village in close to Hyderabad called Domakunda, and they were trying to at that time save a sari called Golabama sari, which is, it's a sari and the motif is a woman with a milk urn on her head, and there was just one weaver left. I know now that in another part of Andhra it was also woven, and they've succeeded in reviving it in that region. But in
Mm.
Domakunda, I'm pretty sure it's done, because that weaver that many years ago was in his 80s. And he told me, he said, the minute one of my loom parts breaks down, I will stop because there's nobody to mend it. So, so there are many crafts. Toda embroidery is another fascinating craft because the community itself is such a closed community. So we were working on a project with the Todas when I was with another organization a few years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
even to get to the village you have to take a four-wheeler which goes up to a point, then somebody will come and collect you and then take you to the community. So uh, I mean, it's tough, but there are people working with Toda embroidery. So
Mm-hmm.
another interesting story is the Kunbi sari of Goa that
Mm-hmm.
was
What is it
picked up.
called?
It's called Kunbi, Kunbi. So it's a
Okay.
tribal weave of that region. And a few years ago, there's this big designer called Wendell Rodrigues. He passed away actually. He
Oh.
had started reviving. There was again only one weaver left, one loom, not much record of it. And today, the government, I think, also did support, and many designers in the area came forward to support, so they could actually, take it forward.
In your website, I saw this. You're trying to revive mushroom too. So what is
So,
that?
mushroom is actually it's a fabric that is a silk and cotton woven in such a way that one side of the fabric feels like pure silk and one side feels like pure cotton. And
Wow.
this is again, this started because in Islam you are not permitted to wear animal fiber
Mm-hmm.
against your skin. So they
Oh.
created this technique where once, so the part that is against your skin is cotton, but to
Hmm.
the world you can show a luxurious fabric that has the shine of silk. So mashru
Wow.
actually, I think in Arabic means permitted. So it's allowed
Hmm.
to be worn. And like I said, Himru has a lot of Persian, Arabic influences. So the base of Himru, the nature of the weave. So Mashru is a twill weave. It's called a twill weave, and Himru is also a twill weave. And
Hmm.
while we were researching on Himru, we realized that all areas that had woven Himru also wove Mashru.
I see.
And Mashru is also woven a lot in Gujarat,
Hmm.
where I'm around Kutch side, uh, where, however, instead of silk, they had started using rayon, which is like synthetic silk, basically.
They replace
So,
silk with rayon.
yes, yes. So,
Okay.
so what we are trying to do is look at pure silk and cotton as per the original uh, sort of structure of the fabric, and see if we can, but can we do something very contemporary with it? Because this is a fabric that doesn't have any distinguishing design or motif. It's something technical. So the only thing that we could think of to do is to look at colors, and can we do contemporary colors that
Hmm.
make it have a more of a global appeal. So if you see the products that we have, they're very European colors, very
Hmm.
like pastel kind of color palette, which is not common to Himru. So we are always trying to walk this line between tradition but marketability. So how do you balance the two out?
Actually, I have a sari,
Mm-hmm.
which is it is not one side cotton, the other side silk. It's not like that.
Mm-hmm.
Some part are like the part that goes on top is one material. The one the pleats and where so that is a
Yes,
different material. It's
yes.
they have what do you call that, joined
Mix the
together
two.
mix, yeah,
Yes,
cotton
yes,
and silk. So is can
yes.
you call this also a mushroom?
No. So a mashu is basically when you weave a fabric, there are two elements, a warp and a weft. So when both of them interlock, the fabric is formed. So if you've ever seen a video of a person weaving, you'll see that he's moving a shuttle from left.
Correct.
So
Uh-huh.
that is the weft that is moving from left to right, and it interlocks with the vertical thread called the warp. So a mushroom, basically, the warp is silk and the weft is cotton, or the
Oh.
warp is cotton and the weft is silk. So that is how a mushroom is created, basically. So what you are talking about is basically it's a plain weave. So at some parts they have woven silk and some parts they have woven cotton. So I think
Hmm.
this was more of an aesthetic choice of the designer who made the sari.
Designer. Do we have something like herringbone, chevron,
Yes,
houndstooth, like kind of
yes,
abstract designs, right? So, what is the
right.
equivalent in our Indian art forms?
So so Indian textiles, the weavers are such masters that I
Mm-hmm.
think that minimalistic is the base on which they build further. So
Oh,
if you think about it, like a sari, what is it? It's a piece of fabric with one line on top, one line on the bottom, and four lines of your archer. That's
hmm,
it. I mean, and then everything else is a modification of that. So
right.
essentially, the base, the technical base of all our textiles is very minimalistic and can be considered very abstract. It's just that our
Okay.
weavers were so skilled, they weren't happy stopping there. They had to go further. So if you see a pashmina, it's called
Mhm.
a chashme bulbul weave. That traditional weave of a pashmina shawl. And if you notice it very closely, it's like it looks like this. I mean, they call it eye of the bulbul basically, but it's like a diamond with a circle inside it. That's it. It's just in repeat a diamond and circle following one another. So we do have a lot of textiles that are very minimalistic, and then we have made them very ornate and very pictorial. But also, like if you take jamdani also, for example, these days designers are playing around with the basic technique to create shapes and sizes that are not flowers and birds like a traditional. They are geometric. They are, you can do a chevron in a jamdani also. So the houndstooth is actually something similar to a houndstooth is woven in Uttarakhand in and Himachal in the woolen shawls that are traditional of that area. So yes, so we do have not everything is a lot of color or a lot of motifs. There is a lot of stuff that is also very even Mangalgiri designers are playing around with the basic technique to create shapes and sizes that are not flowers and birds like a traditional. They are geometric. They are, you can do a chevron in a jamdani also. So the houndstooth is actually something similar to a houndstooth is woven in Uttarakhand in and Himachal in the woolen shawls that are traditional of that area, which are basically stripes. They are they create two colors or maybe even one color in thick and thin stripes. That is what is Mangalgiri. And then of course the weavers went and added a very beautiful golden border to it. So I think it's called a Nizami border, the traditional Mangalgiri border, which has like little diamonds and it's made with zari. So so I think the starting point of and that's why we've been able to create such beautiful stuff, because we begin with just good design basics, and then it's evolved over time. So yeah.
So in Loomkatha, what is your next project?
So we are actually working with Craft Council of Andhra Pradesh to look at a weaving village in Andhra that they make cotton saris, and they are currently struggling to remain relevant. I mean, as of now, there is about 150 looms which are running, but Craft Council of Andhra Pradesh fears that the product is not, it's not going to sustain itself. They are seeing that the demand for that sari is reducing and that the weavers are struggling. So currently we are working on developing some fabrics with them to see, again, can we, like, we are right now in the diagnosis stage of our examination to see what the problem is and to see how we can improve it. We are looking at, can we create women's wear garments? They're only weaving saris. So can we look at using the textile in a different way while keeping the essential nature of the textile the same, that it again, they have a very particular kind of double striped fabric, and they use thin animal motifs in the border. So can we keep those elements, but maybe is it the colors that need to be changed, or is it the the lengths that they're weaving? Do we need to weave smaller lengths to create newer products with that? So that's something that we are working on. So quite excited, and I always have a very long wish list. I want to work with a fabric called Case in Punjab. That I really want to work with. I read a very fascinating article about how around Delhi there are a few weavers, handloom weavers left, who used to weave chaddars. So there are basically 5 to 10 weavers left, and I want to one day visit and see if we can help. So yeah, I think new projects, I mean, there is never a shortage of. We are always up to do something new and challenging.
Arushi, any closing remarks?
Whenever you buy a product, do think about how it was made and try to research. Don't just go by the aesthetics, but do try to research who made it, where it was made, and as far as possible choose handmade and handloom products over machine made ones, so that your purchase also helps to increase the income of a weaver and increase the pride that they have in what they're doing, and help us to preserve these crafts in future.